ready when you are.
Alright, so the title of my paper this semester was Overcoming the Retirement Crisis, Planning for Success. I chose to go with this topic because as we all enter the real world here pretty quick, retirement is going to be right in front of us, as we already have to start planning for it as we start our first jobs. So my objectives in my paper were to focus on how to fill this gap, as Social Security and pensions are no longer really an option for many people as they enter their first jobs or just employment in general. And then I took a look at a few different options and from there try to decide what was most efficient and the best way to plan for your future retirement lifestyle. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to cover the history of retirement, what the retirement crisis is, individual retirement accounts, then employer-sponsored retirement accounts, and then I chose to also look at life insurance and how that can be a tool for retirement, and then finally I will conclude. So the history of retirement, it all started in the late 19th century. They had the idea that you would work until you die, so many people started with their first job, they stayed with that job, and they would work that job until they physically could no longer do it, and were pretty much to the end of their lifespan. So the idea of retirement came from German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. He created the idea of retirement when he wanted to expand the idea of pensions. So this all really started in Germany. It was really well accepted by many people who are working, and so it expanded from there. It was this idea that he wanted more financial security for people instead of just having their pension, and that's what they had when they were close to the end of their work span. So then as it expanded, it came to America, and the American Civil War was a pretty big influence on making it grow in the United States. Civil War pensions were commonly accepted by everybody who was in the Civil War. They would send money home to families of people in the war so they could can keep going and be funded somehow, because most of the times it was husbands off earning, and they were the bring home money, and the wife would be home with children, and they would have no kind of support. So that's where Civil War pensions kind of started. And then that kind of sparked Social Security, because they thought, okay, we have these people in war who are getting this lump sum of money monthly to their family, and then Social Security started from there, because everybody should have that type of opportunity as they work and near the end of their working years receive some type of paycheck or reward for this time that they did. And then there was the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and they were the first to have the employer contribution, so something like a 401k, that as an employee you can contribute to this account and your employer will match it up to a certain percentage or a dollar amount. And then pretty much the start of retirement was just an incentive. They wanted older people to really just get out of there, because they were termed useless workers, which is somebody who could physically or emotionally no longer do their job or fulfill the job requirements. So they wanted younger people in those roles who were also cheaper to have on board, and they were more efficient workers. So throughout history, there has been a lot of changes with retirement, as there's been new ideas and new plans that have grown. Some have not worked, some have worked. And so then getting into what the retirement crisis is. The retirement crisis really is just the result of people not saving enough money for their retirement. It's been a shift from people working and relying on Social Security and pensions, and that was enough to live on in their retirement years. No longer is that available or enough money to live on as you retire. So people can't retire as soon. Older people are still working, which is hard for the new employees and young hires to start working. Overall, there's a lot of people trying to work, and also influences unemployment. So as we've seen, generations before us have been working, they're working longer than generations before us were working less than us, as we are now working longer than our grandparents or great-grandparents ever did. So yeah, generations ago, people could rely on their family inheritance, and that was enough to sustain their retirement, or they'd be able to accumulate enough wealth themselves between Social Security and pensions. So it really has just been a social policy shift, as relying on the government for your retirement to shifting to being responsible for your own retirement and planning and for that kind. So it's hard. People have been having a hard time adjusting to this, which creates this gap or this crisis that people have come to terms with. So yes. So as I did some of this research, I came across a man named James Russell, and he had some really interesting research, because most people are proactive about people taking a stance and saving for their own retirement, but he took a totally different approach, and he thinks the government and employers should still be responsible for people's retirement. His studies showed that Social Security and pensions could be brought back if the nation comes together and has this all in mind. And he argues that 401ks or IRAs are not a good investment tool, because their returns can fluctuate with the market, even though they are a pretty safe investment. So yeah, felt very strongly about the government and employers being responsible for the employees' retirement. And he had a really interesting comparison. He took the healthcare reform and compared it to a retirement reform, that he thinks it's falling short, behind that, because healthcare, you have your hospitals, doctors, pharmaceuticals benefiting, and sometimes the patient will suffer. Where he took a look at the financial side of banks, investment firms, and things like that, where people who trust them are not having significant enough returns to maintain their retirement lifestyle. So he really thinks it should be up to the government and employers to be able to take care of people in their retirement. So then I took another look at some financial educators who had a little bit more of a positive outlook on the retirement lifestyle, and they just thought it takes a positive attitude, positive saving behaviors, and determination and motivation for your retirement lifestyle, and you can save enough and live a healthy retirement. So one of their biggest points was you have to be financially literate in order to be able to be financially well off in your retirement. So to do that, you'd have to have financial knowledge and the skills as an individual to save your money, which if you don't currently have them, you should be able to seek a financial advisor to learn, because this is something you could learn. Their main focus was on the 7 R's, which number 1 is readiness, which as an individual, you should determine your goals, what you want in your retirement, and also be aware of your limitations. Number 2 is resources. Know your available resources of what accounts you could use to invest in to save for your retirement, what's most beneficial for you, and then also who to go to where you can learn about this and expand your knowledge on this topic. And then number 3 is relevance. So you want to make a list of priorities and what's going to be most important in your retirement, how much money you're going to have to keep the standard of living you have. And then number 4 is respect. You have to understand that the future takes planning, and the future doesn't happen overnight, that there will be setbacks and you will make some mistakes with money, but overall you have to have your long-term goals and keep working towards those. And then number 5 is responsibility. You are your own retirement manager, and in order to find success, you have to be responsible for what you're doing. And then number 6 was reward. You have to start small and smart in order for your money to grow big and be able to support you. Again, it's not an overnight thing, and you have to keep working forward. And then number 7 is replication. So once you start these positive behaviors, you have to maintain them and keep moving forward. Otherwise, none of the other 6 points will work. So now I'll move into just briefing over some of the retirement accounts that I thought were most beneficial to use moving into retirement, so people can take their own responsibility for their retirement savings. So individual retirement accounts are pretty important, and they're readily available for almost everybody. You just have to go to a financial institution and you can pretty much start one. There's a traditional and a Roth IRA options. Both are self-managed, and they're both provide some type of tax break. Depends which one you choose or which one you qualify, which you could use. And it just really puts the individual in control of their savings. So a traditional IRA is a tax-deferred retirement account, which means as you put your money in, you're not going to pay taxes on it. So when you do go to withdraw, all your money that you're taking out will be taxed, including your contribution and the earnings you make while your money sits in that account. You can contribute $5,500 a year if you're under 50 and $6,500 if you're over 50. And then at age 70 and a half, with the traditional account, you can no longer contribute and you have to start taking the minimum distributions out of the account. Then moving on to the Roth IRA. This one has a couple more qualifications than traditional. It has a few benefits. So as you contribute to this account, your money is taxed on the initial contribution, but when you go to withdraw, none of that money is taxed. So you already paid taxes on your contribution, but your earnings in the account will never be taxed. And then for a Roth IRA, it all is determined on the tax bracket which you fall into if you qualify. So if you're single and you're making over $164,000, you are not eligible for a Roth. And if you are married and making over $183,000, you're not eligible for a Roth IRA either. So you have a little bit more of a tax benefit here, which is why there's a couple more limitations on it. So the contribution amounts are still the same as their traditional for yearly, and in the long run, if you do qualify for this, it is pretty beneficial. So there's also no minimum distribution limit with a Roth IRA. So like the traditional, we have to pull at 70 and a half, you don't have to do this with a Roth. And also, if somebody is to inherit this money, they don't have to pay any taxes on it, like with a traditional they would. And it's helpful because the government is not involved as much because, again, there's no taxes when you go to withdraw. So I saw a pretty good comparison between these two. So if you have $100,000 with a traditional IRA, then when you go to like sitting in the account, you don't actually have 100 because it will be taxed at some point. But with a Roth IRA, if you have $100,000 in your account, you really do have $100,000 there. So then moving into your employer-sponsored retirement accounts, that includes the 401k or 403b are the two I really looked at. They're really good long-term benefits. Looks at free money. Your employer is giving you money just because you're putting money into this account. And the employer will match some type of contribution. It's either going to be a percentage or a dollar amount. So looking at the 401k, it is a profit sharing plan. As an employee, you are in control of your contribution, which does come right out of your paycheck. You can contribute to the max limit that your employer will match, which is highly suggested to do because then you get your maximum free money. But you cannot withdraw immediately because you have to become invested in the company, which sometimes takes between 3 and 7 years. And that means if you're vested, you can leave the company and take your contributions as well as your employer's contributions with you. So then you have 403b, pretty much just like the 401k, but this account is for public schools, tax-exempt organizations, and some ministers. And this is also an account that easily is rolled over into a Roth IRA, so it has that kind of benefit there. And also, often, if you are eligible for a 403B, your vesting time is a little bit shorter. So then moving into life insurance, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to save for retirement, because life insurance's main goal is to provide financial security for a family if there is to be an unexpected loss of an income earning member. So I thought it was kind of an alternative option when you're saving for retirement to consider. There's two types, there's term and whole life insurance. So with term life insurance, there is no exact return from it, but it's important to consider because it's really not that expensive and does provide financial security for your family. So if a father is to pass away in a family and he has life insurance, there is some type of income replacement there for the family. So for say the mother and her retirement income or retirement savings doesn't have to be pulled from in order to continue to support the family. So there might not be any return directly to the family as in a retirement aspect, but it is just a financially secure way to fund for the future in case something happens. So then there's whole life insurance, which you are guaranteed a return even if you die at 80 or 103. This is a little bit more expensive because again, you are guaranteed some type of return. And they mostly all have savings accounts, which at any time you can draw from. So this is kind of like an investment that maybe you get to age 75 and you want to start drawing from it because you want some other type of income, you can do that. And then, so the four main types were traditional, universal, variable, and variable universal. They all vary a little bit, but they all have some type of savings account, such as universal though, you can adjust your premiums of what you pay. If you can't make a certain payment, you can pull from your savings with that account to cover some of your premium. And variable, you can make different investments in some stocks, bonds, mutual funds with that. So it's a little bit more risky with variable, but you also have high returns if it works out. So between all those, you still have the life coverage, which is just a good financial security thing for your family, but also eventually if you do get to the retirement age and you don't need your life insurance, you can start withdrawing from it and from a savings account there that you have earned some money in. So overall, I learned that it's really important when you're saving for retirement that you're financially aware of what is going on and knowledgeable about the resources you have. And also it's really important to diversify your savings. You can't put all your money in one place because if something is to go south, all your money will go with it. And as an individual, you have to take responsibility for your savings. And I found it was really important that a 401k, 403b, or an IRA is probably the top two that you should use when you're starting to save for retirement. And if you do have leftover funds that you can continue to invest for retirement purposes, life insurance would be an alternative. So overall, if you use all those efficiently and to their potential, you can effectively save for your retirement.